everybody. This is Bradley Grunner with the Moss Macros Podcast, number 13. I'm here today, as always, with Stu Yellen and Arash Rabar, and today we're going to be discussing genetics and bodybuilding. So, first, let's go over the importance of genetics in bodybuilding. I happen to think they're of great importance in bodybuilding. Stu, what about you?
Well, it's one of those things where it can be used as an excuse. It could be used as a way to cut down someone else's accomplishments.
Yes.
It's, a lot of times you hear people say that it's the great equalizer, among all the variables at play for a successful bodybuilder. At the end of the day, if everyone's doing everything correctly, this is going to be the ultimate decider.
Yes.
Arash, you've been up there with the best of them. What do you think?
I think for me, it's a no-brainer. Genetics are extremely, extremely important. They're the first thing that comes to mind. I mean, if someone doesn't have the structure, doesn't have the build, or has some irregularity in their physique, that's just going to kind of close the door as how far they can go in bodybuilding. That being said, the word genetics gets thrown around a lot. I feel that there's many different aspects of genetics. Someone may have good genetics as far as they don't store much fat. Someone can have good genetics as far as they can put on muscle easier. Then there's genetically blessed bodybuilders that have amazing muscle bellies, or the muscle tie-ins, or structure. So there's many different variables. I think if you're able to compete and do well and possibly win shows on an amateur level and possibly turn professional, you have good genetics. Now, how good you have, you compare a Flex Wheeler or Sean Ray to a Phil Heath. These are three of the most genetically gifted bodybuilders to ever walk the earth, and it doesn't have to do just with their capability of gaining muscle, lean muscle mass, and keeping body fat off, but it also has to do with their symmetry, their crazy, crazy proportions, their bone structure, and their muscle tie-ins. The muscle tie-ins and the muscle bellies. So, Kevin Levrone, one of my favorite bodybuilders growing up in the 90s, he had great genetics in many different categories of what I just mentioned, but one of the main things he was known for was he was nutritionally, he was a genius. His body was amazing at partitioning nutrients. The guy would eat literally hot dogs and ice cream and gain lean muscle mass. So just one of few bodybuilders to mention that comes to mind when I think of freak genetics is Kevin Levrone. He would literally take time off when everybody else was in the off season gaining weight, training, and eating their heads off, and he would come out of nowhere and just grow into a show and step on stage looking remarkable.
Right. For me, being that we're discussing the variables of genetics with structure and muscle bellies, I think the ultimate in that respect with the structure and muscle bellies, and maybe not I don't know how to say it, maybe not the most rugged physique or the greatest strength, is Flex Wheeler, who I think maybe has, by his own volition or someone else's statements, has stated to not put his whole package together and not utilize his genetics to the fullest. I think someone like Sean Ray probably has great structure, muscle bellies, and someone who came in tight all the time. But then you get some other guys like a good example is one of my favorites, an underdog, is Hamdullah Akulu, who had great genetics for getting totally shredded. I don't know what he did with his nutrition, but then again, like we're saying, there are a lot of variables here. He didn't have just the conditioning. I think that he lacked the fullness, actually, or the muscular size to get the whole package together. Stu, you know that guy that I'm talking about, right? Hamdullah Kulu.
Oh yeah, dude, the guy was shredded. You're talking like Andreas Munzer level here.
Yeah. But
right. I think this is where you're going with this. There are competitors, and I've seen this when I was competing. I've seen this as a coach who they're never going to be able to achieve that level of conditioning. There are
right.
If we're talking about the IFBB, there are guys that jump from coach to coach to coach, and they're still it eludes them.
Right. Now, but do you think that someone like, let's say, Hamdullah Kulu or Andreas Munzer, they did give off almost like a, kind of like, not Munzer, but Akulu almost had like a lanky, more slender build where he couldn't, let's say, he placed 10th at the Olympia once, actually, back in the day in the 90s. He just couldn't get that really round, thick as hell look as like someone like Mike Francois, right? What do you think held him back?
Look, I don't know statistics off the top of my head. I couldn't tell you how tall Francois or Hamdullah was. I think a lot of it has to do, like Arash was saying earlier, you've got bone structure there, you've got muscle bellies, you've got a lot of factors that, conditioning aside, that's your physique. That's your physique. We were having lunch earlier with my brothers and my brother Jeff, and Jeff has competed also, and I'm 5'8", and Jeff's 6 feet tall, and we have very, very different structures.
Yes.
Now we've both been pretty shredded on stage. Our physiques would never look similar. Never.
Right. Exactly.
And I mean that's really shining a light on all the other variables. As an aside, and Jeff just kind of walked in and kind of pointed this out to me. Luckily, Facebook brings things to your attention. 1 year anniversary, 2 year anniversary, guys. This is the 1 year anniversary of our first podcast.
Get out of here!
Yes,
I know, right? So
yes.
yeah, for anyone kind of listening, we're recording this. What is this? Saturday here, and
yes.
I know it usually takes us
I was
a few
wondering
days
what
to
he
get
came
it up.
in here to say.
Right? He came in here
Exactly, yeah.
all
Happy
secret,
anniversary, guys.
secret and stealthy, and he showed me something on his phone. I'm like, oh wow,
Yes.
look at that, the 1 year anniversary. But happy birthday, Moss Macros podcast.
Yes. And so this is the year we want to kind of up our efforts and
Right,
turn up
yeah.
more information. The little lull in our lives there, but we want to turn up the output now. But back to what we're
Yes,
saying, to what
of
you're
course.
saying. Yes.
Again, it's, so many variables.
Yes.
So many variables. I've seen guys at shows that are just huge and impressive.
Yes.
And I'm either in the judges table or I'm in the audience or I'm backstage and I'm watching and I'm thinking, if this guy could just bring the conditioning.
Right, but that's a good point though, because most people think of genetics, they think of the ability to build muscle or your structure. Now, do you think, and you're a successful coach, and Arash, you coach people as well as compete at a high level, do you both think there's also a genetic component as the degree of conditioning someone gets? For some people will say, well, as long as you do X, Y, and Z with your diet and have the right formula, you will be shredded. And other people will say, well, no matter how much this woman, even not only male competitors, some female competitors, I actually think that some females cannot get a six-pack. Meaning they're going to get slimmer, they're going to get leaner. I think that there's some females out there or some people who just don't get the hard look. They don't get that hard vascular look, no matter what they do. They do have a result from their regimen. Do you know where I'm going with this?
Well, I think you're wondering if genetically it's just not in the cards for some.
Yes, exactly.
And I mean, look, I say this a lot. I think it comes down. I don't want to say where I was gonna go with that, but I don't think that I would have ever been able to get shredded glutes on my own physique the way some people do, without giving up a lot of the really thick size that I carried at my best.
Right.
Now, and again, this is me here. Now, as a coach, I can't believe that. I can't. I have to assume that there's got to be a way, and with every client, we're going to find that way.
Right, exactly. Now, like we said, before, we've discussed the ultimate in conditioning and natural bodybuilding is someone like Brian Whitaker. Wouldn't you say that the conditioning is
Amazing.
Just off the charts, just phenomenal?
He sets the standard.
Now, most people, if they went to that distance, I think they would pretty much, to put it in a kind of humorous way, collapse. Maybe he has this edge. Maybe that we don't.
I think genetics definitely has a big part to do with what you guys are talking about.
Yes.
Absolutely. I think, obviously genetics goes back to our ancestors, what they did. Some people living in different regions of the world needed to maintain a higher percentage of body fat because of climate. And it sounds funny, but these are the facts. And that's what pretty much hardwires your genetics. That's where it comes from.
Yes.
That being said, there's many, many, many variables. I have clients come to me and they're just not getting shredded. They're not getting hard. They're not getting grainy. But they haven't been bodybuilding for 5-10 years.
Right, exactly.
Me personally, I've been bodybuilding since I was 13. Bradley, you met me over 15 years ago. I made gains, I made progress after 10 years, but I was never one of those grainy, hard, vascular guys, ever. Until I put on a tremendous amount of muscle on my frame, until I started breaking 190 to 200 pounds lean body mass. That's when I started to see some hardness, some vascularity. So, for me, well, there you go. It took me that long. I remember my training partners would have veins running down their arms. I never did. And when I would diet in my earlier years, I would always end up looking a little bit soft, a little bit smooth. I never had that crisp look. And it took me, now I'm nearing 23 years. So I think yes, absolutely. I know some guys just genetically are more capable of holding a lower body fat with ease. I think a big part of this, what your genetics represents, is not only what you can or cannot do. Let's just say hypothetically, everyone can get ripped. Everyone can gain muscle. And there is truth to that. It is possible. Pretty much anyone can get lean. Anyone can get a six-pack, but with how much effort?
Yes.
Is your genetic are you predispositioned where you're not supposed to be like this? Your body doesn't want to be sub 8%? Well, it's going to be much harder than the guy that can walk around, not even really breaking a sweat, walking around at 8%. We have human beings that don't compete in bodybuilding shows and are literally 8%, just hanging out at the corner, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I see that, but even someone like Dave Palumbo, who's just pretty much going to the gym, I think from what I hear from what he's saying on his shows lately, is that he's pretty much a guy who's just going to the gym for health at this point, but the guy he looks really lean for a guy his age, even though he's less muscular than he once was, but even when he was competing, he was freakishly lean. You guys remember, right? I mean,
but that doesn't, it goes out the window with someone like him because he has over 2 decades of bodybuilding under his belt. And also, I think he still watches what he eats. I think if he was to just eat like a quote-unquote average person, I don't think he would have the vascularity that you see him having.
You know, it's interesting what you're saying. It sounds... Well, I'm not... disagreeing with this. Yeah. I'm saying it's almost like, you talk about muscle maturity, like over time. Yes. Your body becomes more efficient, it becomes better at being leaner.
That's what I think.
I'm thinking to myself, it's like, the leaner I stayed in my off seasons, the better my insulin sensitivity was, and then the following prep, I was able to eat more carbs and get leaner than the prep before, and it was like you trained your body to be able to do that. Now that doesn't mean as lean as I was able to get was any better than someone else. And what I mean by that is I think everyone can improve on things, but their own natural genetics are going to dictate how far they can truly go.
Exactly. With the muscular size and the conditioning.
Well, I'm saying the conditioning too.
Right.
Muscular size, I think that goes without saying. People, you're only going to get as big as your genetics will let you.
Right.
And I think that what Arash was saying that, you put the time in, and just like with muscular size, you don't know where you're going to, what your genetics will allow until you reach that point. And it's the same thing with the conditioning.
Right, exactly. And also, now that we've gotten those topics, as far as the structure, muscle bellies, ability to build muscle, the ability to get more conditioned than the next man, or the length of time that it takes to get into the proper conditioning, as we said, how about we go over the effort? For example, there are some people out there, and this has become a very big thing with social media, people trying to take away from others' accomplishments depending on whatever variable. I mean, some people have actually tried to take away the accomplishments of someone like Paul DeLay or Flex Wheeler, saying they were all genetics. Like, for example, you'll get someone, I don't mind mentioning his name because this man dishes out names like no problem. Someone like Boston Lloyd will say, that guy's all genetics. This guy was all genetics. If I had his genetics, I could do what he does. But the end result is that he can't do that, and neither can I. Meaning, someone will make fun of Paul DeLay saying, the guy never benched over 225 for 10, and he got an Olympia stage. But the thing is that I can't take that away from him. If that's what it took for him to get from point A to point B, I don't think it's right to belittle him or take it away from him. Can I get on the Olympia stage? No. You know where I'm going with this?
Well, look, the people that are on the Olympia stage, the people that are doing it, are not sitting there behind a computer talking about others.
Exactly.
Anybody that's going to sit there on social media or any other venue and point fingers and talk about others is unhappy. Without getting poetic, they're unhappy with themselves.
Yes.
If you're gonna, they're just projecting their own shit onto you.
Yes.
But that being said, everybody has their own story. Depends how long you've been training. If somebody comes in the gym right now, I'm how many months away after the Olympia? I did the Olympia in September. We're in February. I'm not training like as insane and heavy as I was in the Olympia. Someone comes see me in the gym now, they're like, oh shit, Arash doesn't train that hard. I do. I'm just working around a couple little aches and pains and some issues. But I have 23 years under my belt. Yes. If you can get on the Olympia stage and place well doing 225, God bless you, because that bodybuilder's gonna last longer. I do not want to lift heavy. Unfortunately, that's what has worked for me. There's a lot of damage that's being done when you lift heavy. I don't care how safe you are. The human body is very weak. So people are always quick to point fingers, genetics, or even anabolic use and things like that. But there's many variables that you guys don't know sitting at home. You know,
Right.
people see me up on stage, they'll see me on Instagram, but they don't see what I've done for 10 years prior to that, 20 years prior
Yes.
to that, you know? So there's many factors, you know. Oh, if I had Paul Dillette's genetics. If you had Paul Dillette's genetics and you trained your ass off and did everything correct, yes, you'd be on the Olympia stage. But if you had Paul Dillette's genetics and you sat around on your ass acting the way you're acting right now, you wouldn't accomplish shit.
Yes,
you know,
exactly.
And a big thing that we haven't brought up in this conversation is genetics and muscle tie-ins and all that stuff. That's one thing, but your mental state, your mind frame going forward in bodybuilding is more important than anything. If I give you Phil Heath's diet and Phil Heath's training routine, I think I've said this in a different podcast.
Yes.
You know, and you think it came from Joe Schmo and you don't have faith in it, you're not going to get any results from it. But if I give you Joe Schmo's diet and you think it was Phil Heath's diet, and you're going to have so much faith, true, genuine faith, that you're going to get results. A half-assed diet and a half-assed routine with 100% faith is better than anything.
Yes, exactly.
You know, so the mental aspect that we know a lot of genetically gifted bodybuilders that didn't get as far as they possibly could because they weren't mentally strong. And if you are not mentally strong and sound, you will fail in this sport. Mark my words.
You know, I gotta say it's interesting. You talk about half-assed dieting, and I mean, everyone's very, and this isn't just bodybuilders and online experts and wannabe coaches, which, you know, is everyone these days. They're all very quick to look at what someone else is doing and saying, well, you know, that's not ideal, that's not optimal. You know, this is what you should do. And this. Now, in the meantime, you're gonna look at Paul Dillette's training. You're gonna look at Paul Dillet's diet. This guy stood on the Olympia stage, what, how many years in a row?
A long
How
time.
many years
Then
in a
he
row?
won the NOC also. I saw
Okay.
him win the NOC.
Okay,
Yeah.
now, what he was doing, you're going to say it didn't work?
It worked.
It didn't work.
If you
Think about it, okay?
Right.
If it's yielding results,
Exactly.
then you can't say it doesn't work.
Let alone not the Olympia stage. He won the NOC, the Night of Champions. You don't win the third most important pro.
No. I mean, look, the guy didn't win the Olympia. Well, let's look who was ahead of him. You know,
Yeah.
it's a freaking who's who
Right.
of like the greatest bodybuilders in history.
But just to be on the Olympia stage means you are a great bodybuilder.
Yeah, and also on a
Let's get it
side note, that era, everybody was amazing.
They were
And I
phenomenal.
don't mean just genetically. Everybody was conditioned back then. You
Yes.
didn't have soft, sloppy guys. So
Yeah, but even with the freaks back then, and we're going to get back to the topic of genetics, but back then, I think the genetic pool was a lot better, or they were just working smarter, or the genetics were better, as I said. I mean, even the freaks back then, I saw Marcus Rule compete at the NOC. He was a monster, but he was shredded, conditioned. Everybody, Mike Francois, Sean
But
Ray.
let me say one. I don't want to go off on a tangent, but one side note, like about the weight and pushing how much weight. Some people are genetically, you know, stronger. Some people have genetically more fast twitch muscle fibers. They might have more powerlifting or wrestling in their ancestry, or whatever the case may be. So let's say you are that person, and I am not. So for you, 315 bench press for 10 reps is going to be somewhat easy, and it's going to give you maybe, let's say, 80%, right, of your max work. For me, that if I'm getting the same amount of work, max effort, 80%, but with 225, I'm going to get the same results. You might get 20% muscle gain from it. I will get 20% muscle gain for it too. So that plays a big factor. Some guys are growing off of 225 on bench. Some guys won't grow unless they're doing 405, you know?
Exactly.
So all these things come into play, and you guys do not know all the factors.
Yes, exactly. And now, onto another area that kind of the other more interesting side of this is the response to performance-enhancing drugs. Now, some people say that there are
There's the hot
I should have
topic.
said the dark side or the side that everybody
Right.
loves talking about. The thing is that performance-enhancing drugs. There's this, I guess it's a theory. See, to me, and even the famous sprinter Ben Johnson, I remember he had an interview on T Nation one time where he said that if you're talented, you will be a good responder to drugs. I mean, if you're a good responder, you're talented. I mean, it goes hand in hand. That's what I think. I think someone who is genetically blessed will also be blessed in responding to diets and responding to drugs as well. What do you think? I don't think there's this type of person out there who is weak and frail and at the same time being a great responder to drugs. I think they all go hand in hand. What do you think? I mean, what do you say about that?
Well, I mean, look, if we're gonna All right, let's two names that immediately come to mind to me. To me, when people talk about responders,
Yes.
we got Lavroni, which we mentioned already. The guy would admittedly go off all of his stuff for the majority of the year because he was concerned about his health, and then come back as if he didn't miss a step. Yates allegedly has posted his his regimen, whatever you want to call it, his protocol, and people are so quick to say that's impossible. There's no way that's all you used back in the day, and you reset the standards for size, because people don't want to hear that. Lee Priest. Okay, Lee Priest, very, very famous for claiming that he used a lot less than most people do. And I'll tell you, I've spoken to competitors these days that will tell you, I'm terrified. I use as little as I possibly can, and that's not what people want to hear, because people want to believe that if someone else is doing better than they are, it has to be attributable to something else, to some element beyond hard work and proper diet and motivation, and because it's easier, it makes you feel better about yourself. The bottom line is some people respond very, very well to performance enhancing drugs, and other people will load up on them, and they still are some of the worst built guys in the gym.
Right.
That's why it's a touchy topic. No one ever wants to hear, no matter how hard you work, you're not going to be as good as so-and-so. But that's the reality of things. That's the reality. When I first started competing, the guy who really talked me into competing was Jim Cordova. And even, flash forward, 3-4 years later, I had 2 pro cards, I took a second at the America. I was damn proud of myself. I looked better than I ever thought I would. I knew that on my best day, I would never beat Jim Cordova. I knew what the judging criteria was. I knew what I was capable of. And I also knew what Jim was capable of and what he looked like. And you know what? At that level, you reach the pro stage, all the tricks I know, everyone else knows them. All the dietary approaches that I got, they all got it. All the little posing tricks I know how to hide my weaknesses and flaunt my strengths, they got them. They know them. So what does it come down to? What are you left with? You're left with genetics. And some people got a prettier package thanks to the DNA fairy than I did. And there's nothing I can do to change that. Right. And if you let it make you crazy, well, you're not going to be too happy.
Rosh, do you have any input on the responders?
Oh, absolutely. I absolutely do. I completely 100% agree with your opening statement about somebody having talent, good genetics, and responding well. I've never in my life, being around this sport for 20 plus years and working with clients for the past couple years, I've never seen someone skinny or bad structure or no muscularity get on anabolics and all of a sudden look like a freak. And the analogy that I like to use to explain to people is this: race fuel. For those of you that aren't don't know what race fuel is, it's high octane gas that you use in race cars to make them go faster. They burn better and they have higher octane than what you would get in a gas station. If you put race fuel in a Toyota Prius, nothing will happen. Why? Because the Prius is not tuned for it. It's not a built super engine. But if you put it in a race car that's tuned for it and ready to take it, that car is going to go faster on that race fuel. So when you take someone that doesn't have great structure, great genetics, great receptors, or a background in bodybuilding, they haven't been lifting and pushing themselves, priming their body to receive any supplements or more food or more rigorous training, or in this, for this topic, anabolic steroids, then they're not going to get any results from it. It's not a magic pill. I know everyone's heard this time and time again, but it's not. It doesn't work that way. And rule of thumb that I always say is you want to do the least amount of work and get the most amount of results. You want to do the least amount of cardio and burn the most amount of fat. You want to eat the most amount of food as you can and still get lean. If you can get lean eating cheeseburgers, then why would you diet? You eat the cheeseburgers, but most people can't. That's why they cut it out and cut the caloric intake lower and lower. And the same thing goes for drugs. If you're going to take performance enhancement drugs, you want to do the least amount possible. But a lot of people will just jump on these ridiculous doses. So what happens is their bodies adapt to that, and they're clogging their receptors, and that becomes their standard. There's no going back from that. If you take one Tylenol today and it helps your headache, and you take that every day for the next 2 weeks, after 2 weeks you're going to need 2 Tylenol, and so on and so forth. The next time, the next thing you know, you're going to be taking 6 Tylenols to do the same thing that one Tylenol did. And that goes for the same with performance enhancing drugs. So you want to do the least amount. You want to put the least amount of stuff in your body in every aspect, that to get the most amount of results. You want to be safe and you want to be smart.
Right, exactly. And with that said, about the peds aside, now let's move on to the topic of genetics being an excuse of some sort. I mean, I don't think that genetics should be an excuse to anything that you want to do. I mean, if you love bodybuilding, just go ahead and do it and just don't think about it. Wherever you wind up, you wind up. Whether you're just a guy who goes to the gym and is a so-called recreational bodybuilder, then obviously you don't have to fret at all. But if you want to be competitive and, let's say, do decently, I mean, wherever you're going to wind up with your best effort, you're going to wind up with your best effort. I don't think there's any well-doing, how do I put this, benefit to thinking about your genetics constantly. Stu, you know what I mean? Like, do you guys know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Well, look, I mean, you see people, how should I put this, on different forums, they're going to ask advice.
Yes.
Okay? And in their first posting, let me give you some background on myself. I'm 6'2", I've been training 2 months, I'm doing blah, 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 blah. I don't have the best genetics. Okay, you know what? You don't know that yet.
Right.
You don't.
Well, you don't know where you're going to wind up, but even if you were to think about your genetics, that's not going to tell you, your thoughts are not going to dictate where you wind up anyway. So if you like this and you want to do it, you put your best foot forward and see where you wind up. You might wind up better than you thought. I would say that people who have great genetics probably know it at a very young age. I think that they are aware of it. But
are they? Look,
I think
I had friends who, in hindsight, were pretty effing jacked in like high school. And
yes.
Look, the last thing I was thinking of in high school was, I want to look like Mr. Olympia. I was thinking, I got to get the new X-Men comic.
Well, people who are talented or genetically gifted in anything, I think that they're aware of it pretty young. I mean, a great baseball player, don't you think they're aware of this when they're in Little League?
Some people yes, some people no. But you started this topic with saying, should people overthink the genetics? Listen, if you're going to quit your day job and set your life to being number one in the world and be in the Olympia stage, be Mr. Olympia, yeah, you should go to a laboratory and make sure you have good genetics first. But anybody else just wanting to succeed in, it doesn't have to necessarily be competitive bodybuilding, but when I say bodybuilding, I mean training and dieting for changes in body composition. You don't need to wear a Speedo to be a bodybuilder. I was a bodybuilder far before I ever competed, stepped on stage.
Yes.
But people that are training for these changes in body composition, who gives a shit what your genetics are? Who cares, if you're going to be the best at your gym or the best on the stage? Just be the best that you can be, as cliche as that sounds. Train your ass off. Don't overthink it.
Say your prayers, eat your vitamins.
Yeah, the people
exactly.
The people that are thinking like that are the same people that are thinking like that in relationships, purchasing a home, and in their careers. And you're going to lose out. You're going to lose out on enjoying your life, and you're going to lose out on a lot of opportunities. I don't have great genetics, so I won't train hard. Well, if you train hard, you're going to look better. Your clothes are going to fit you better. You're going to be healthier. You're going to play with your kids. You're going to live longer. There's a lot of good things that will come from it. No, you might not be number one in the world. Not everybody has what it takes.
Exactly, but you can, like you said, just as an aside, because we are human beings here. Besides being bodybuilders, I think that if people question themselves and are always being self-deprecating, you're going to hold yourself back in all areas of life. You don't need to be the best in everything or the highest paid professional to live a satisfying life, to have a great career, or have a satisfying relationships or friendships. You don't have to be the best in everything to have great achievements for you in your life. And also, let's just go over here. Do you think that some people who are operating at a high level, competing at a high level, doing whatever they do you think that some of them try to, in their interviews or their articles that they write, do you think they try to downplay the genetics to give the masses, not a false hope, but this indication that maybe they could be better than what they really are? For example, the notion that one can, quote, outwork one's genetics. Or I remember this is a good example. For example, Matt Krachalewski, who's now Jane Marie Krachalewski, but once several times said that his genetics were subpar. He just always went pedal to the metal. Now, if I recall, he deadlifted, I think, 700 and change, squatted 900, maybe a little more than 900. I don't believe that someone with genetics, drugs, whatever you want to call it, whatever aids that you use, whatever training program you use, I don't believe that someone with run-of-the-mill genetics is going to accomplish a 900-plus pound squat with drugs or not. What do you think of that? You understand what I'm trying to say?
No, I understand what you're saying. Look, it's kind of like the subtle brag. You know what you guys know what I mean about subtle brag?
Yeah.
It's a way of bragging by kind of downplaying something that you know you accomplished that was pretty badass.
Yeah, but it's like you're saying it's badass, but are they trying to say, okay, he worked very hard for it. Anybody works very hard for it.
No. I'm not saying he didn't work hard.
No, right. But what I'm saying
But the whole, I accomplished X, Y, and Z, and this is with bad genetics. No, it's not with bad genetics. If it was bad genetics, it wouldn't happen.
I don't even think the vast majority of these athletes really truly understand what they mean by good or bad genetics. I don't know, what was he referring to, bad genetics? Like, he doesn't look like a bodybuilder?
Well, he actually competed as a bodybuilder also, but when he was a powerlifter, he always said that he had bad genetics, and it's simply from his...
Okay, if you can step on stage and not be a failure, like a total laughingstock, then you don't have bad genetics. If you can lift weights and not fall apart, you don't have bad genetics. I mean, to say he had bad genetics, well, clearly he had the ligaments and tendons to support that type of lifting for X amount of years. So no, for powerlifting, he did not have bad genetics. He had good genetics.
Exactly.
But that being said, I think a lot of people can deadlift 700 pounds. When you think about the teenage kids around the gym, good form or bad form, there's kids around me in the gym on a daily basis deadlifting 4 or 5 plates. That's become the norm now.
Yes.
And I think it's like the 4-minute mile. Before anybody ran the 4-minute mile, no one thought it was possible.
Right.
Now, regular non-professional athletes run 4-minute miles. When I was growing up, teenagers and guys in their mid-20s, early 20s weren't deadlifting average guys in the gym 500 pounds. Now, I see kids deadlifting 3 plates like it's nothing, like teenagers. I see kids deadlifting 4 or 5 plates. They're not big. They don't look like bodybuilders. But when you see a lot of people doing it, you think it's more possible. And again, your mind comes into play. And when the advent of social media and YouTube, we're exposed to more people doing more shit, and it makes us believe that we can do that stuff as well.
Yes, that's a good point as well. That's a very good point, actually. Once you see that it's possible, you see others doing it. And also, it's a matter of information also. You see all these other people doing it. You get your hands on, how to progress and, proper form, proper nutrition, proper program designed to keep progressing further.
All these things weren't possible just like a decade ago.
Yeah.
Wait, what was it?
Well, think about it, right? You could go online.
Yes.
His powerlifter you like. Go to his website, buy his ebook, ask him questions. Like I'm just saying like that.
Yeah, the access to
this was just like 10 years ago. You weren't doing that.
Exactly. So I think that people are progressing faster, and they've also...
When I was growing up, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but we didn't have access to the bodybuilders. A pro bodybuilder was like, oh my God, it's such a big deal. Now, guys are asking all these top pros questions on Instagram, they're answering.
Right, exactly. And I also think that the use of forums, meaning that even people who, for example, T Nation is a great site. Mm-hmm. You could go on, speak to other experienced people, whether they're powerlifters, bodybuilders, physique competitors, and you could say, well, this is my position here. This is where I'm at. Has anybody in this position been in this position for? What should I do going from here? Meaning that it's more a sharing of information to get how to get past plateaus.
Absolutely.
Yes, that's what I think is very important. And
like-minded folk, man.
Yeah, so you're really pushing each other as far as, let's say, emotionally and mentally, but also pushing each other with the correct information on how to go forward. Even with injury prevention or other stumbling blocks, dietary mistakes, plateaus with fat loss, and that's really helping everybody out.
What's better, pancakes or waffles?
That's
a big argument I see brought up constantly.
Yeah, of course. Yes, exactly. So that's where we've gone pretty much over all the aspects of the genetic question, so to speak. Do any of you two want to add anything else, or do you think that we've nailed it down? I mean, we've pretty much gone over all the topics, I think.
Well, I think we gave it a very, very nice overview. It's just kind of interesting to see. I was talking before about like Jim Cordova and his genetics and the shape, and again, he's very similar to the whole Flex Wheeler thing. I remember Flex saying once he had done bad at a certain show, and he said once they know what you're capable of, once they have an idea of what you're supposed to look like, they kind of judge you against it, even if you're the best guy on stage. if you're not as good as they're used to seeing you, then they're going to mark you off. Now, again, I think this was Flex just unhappy with not winning a certain show.
Right.
But it's kind of an interesting thought. You
Yes.
know, the whole, they know what you're capable of. Do you reward the guy with the best genetics? Or do you reward the guy who obviously suffered and trained harder? And again, this is, you know, this it's kind of hard to pin it down without like definite examples.
Right.
You know? But I mean, look, I judge a lot of shows, and I see guys that bring the condition, they suffer like a mother.
Yes.
And then there's other guys that are on stage where you're like, wow, you know, that guy could be a lot better. And again, this is based on their actual conditioning right there,
Right.
not what they could have done, but it's the conditioning. But you can see the aesthetics this guy has, the symmetry that this guy has, proportions, the muscle belly. It's like, wow, if this guy nailed it down. Now, I mean, look, I know how I vote as a judge, but you know, it's something to consider.
Yes.
Yeah, I think another big thing is when you guys are looking and everyone looks at these top bodybuilders, right? Bodybuilders are a tiny percentage of the population, even smaller percentage of professional athletes. These are the genetic elite, right? But they're also the very rare person that actually stuck with it for 5, 10, 15, 20 years and worked day in and day out. Many other people, genetics or not, give up, quit, or just don't have what it takes physically, mentally, or because of their life or family or whatever the case may be. So when you're looking at these people and you're, the genetics or this or that, they didn't just wake up and go to the gym and then because of their superb genetics look like that within a few months or even a year.
Exactly.
You know, you can go and look at the timeline of my pictures. I have pictures since I was 12 years old, or any other bodybuilder. Everyone has a different story. Some guys got to where they are a lot faster, and some guys took longer. But what we all have in common at the professional level is that we all had a burning desire, and we didn't stop, slow down, quit, or give up until we got to where we are now. I mean, me personally, I can only speak for myself. I'm still not stopping. You know, and there might be some bumps in the roads at times and I slow down, but yeah, I have good genetics. How good are they? I don't think they're as good as most of the people we spoke about in today's podcast, but shit, I've been doing this for 23 years. You know, like I never would have known that I'm capable of this if I didn't give my heart and soul. If I stopped and said, at 20 years old, do I have the genetics to be number one in the world, let's say hypothetically, the answer probably would be no. But, you know, fast forward 15 years later, and, you know, I'm not doing bad by any means. I'm competing at a high level, and I'm utilizing my genetics, so to speak.
Right. Very good points, actually, with the amount of effort and time that it takes for your genetics to show, actually, is what you're getting at. So I think that wraps it up, and I hope that the information that we provided you to give you an insight of you know what you should be doing as a bodybuilder or anything that you want to accomplish in life and how you stack up. And we'll catch you next time. Thanks for being with us.
Take care, guys.
Have a good one.
Yes.